I never thought my own flesh and blood would reduce 60 years of sweat and soil to a handful of seeds. The Anderson family farm, 3,000 acres of prime Iowa soil that my father and his father before him had worked, was supposed to be my legacy. Worth nearly $3 million now, with the new highway bringing development pressure. My son Kyle stood there on my 67th birthday, holding out that burlap sack like some kind of peace offering. "Dad, I know you're upset about the inheritance paperwork, but I thought you might want these heirloom corn seeds. They're from Grandpa's original strain." The room fell silent. My sister Martha looked away. My brother-in-law Robert suddenly found his shoes fascinating. Even my granddaughter stopped texting. I'd raised that boy since he was knee-high to a grasshopper, taught him everything about this land. The farm that had survived the farm crisis of the 80s when neighbors lost everything. The land that put him through college when we mortgaged it to the hilt. And now he was offering me seeds to start over at 67 years old? What Kyle didn't know was that I had my own seeds to plant. Seeds of truth about our family that would bring this whole carefully constructed harvest of lies crashing down around us. The Andersons weren't just farmers in Boone County, we were institutions. My grandfather Thomas Anderson homesteaded this land during the Dust Bowl, when everyone else was fleeing west. 4 generations of us had turned these fields from dusty prairies to some of the most productive corn and soybean acreage in the Midwest. I was born Frank Anderson in 1958, the eldest son and presumed heir to it all. My father, Richard Big Dick Anderson, was what folks around here called salt of the earth to his face and meaner than a wounded bull behind his back. He ran the farm, the local Farm Bureau chapter, and our family with the same iron fist. Mother was gentle but faded into the background, like so many farm wives of her generation. My sister Martha came along 2 years after me. She was always the smart one, eventually escaping to the University of Iowa and becoming a veterinarian in Des Moines. I stayed, dropped out of community college after 1 semester because the corn doesn't harvest itself, boy, as my father reminded me daily. I married young to Sarah Johnson from the neighboring farm. We had Kyle when I was just 22, and I promised myself I'd be different from my father. I'd be patient, understanding. I'd make sure my son knew he was valued beyond his ability to work the land. I remember when Kyle was 8, he entered the county fair with a prize pig he'd raised himself. He'd spent months with that animal, named it Wilbur after the book we read together. My father came to the fair smelling of whiskey, looked at the ribbon, 2nd place, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Andersons don't raise 2nd place animals, boy. Maybe your daddy's gone soft on you." Kyle cried all the way home in the truck. I told him I was proud of him, but the damage was done. I should have stood up to my father that day. It was the first of many times I failed my son. When Kyle was 16, he crashed the tractor into the irrigation equipment. Nothing serious, just teenage carelessness. But my father made him work off the damages by hand-digging drainage ditches for an entire summer. Character building, he called it. I watched my son's hands blister and bleed, just as mine had. The defining moment came when Sarah got sick. Cancer. It moved fast, taking her when Kyle was just starting college at Iowa State for agricultural business. My father, in what I thought was his grand gesture of compassion, paid off all of Sarah's medical bills and Kyle's first 2 years of tuition. "Family takes care of family," he announced at her funeral like some benevolent patriarch. What nobody knew, what I discovered only after my father passed 3 years later, was that he'd used the farm as collateral for those payments. He'd secretly transferred the farm's ownership to himself from the family trust my grandfather had established, then taken out loans against it. I was technically working land that was drowning in debt. I spent the next 20 years digging us out, rebuilding, modernizing. Kyle graduated and came back with new ideas. Organic sections, wind leases, direct-to-consumer sales. Some worked brilliantly, some failed expensively. But we were partners, or so I thought. The secret I kept from Kyle was that I never legally reversed what my father had done. The farm remained in my name alone, despite Kyle's growing contribution. I told myself I was protecting our legacy from potential business failures or a possible divorce if Kyle ever remarried after his first wife left him. The truth was, I was afraid of losing control, just like my father had been. But there was another secret, one buried even deeper. During those hard years after Sarah died and my father's financial manipulation came to light, I made a desperate choice. I sold 50 acres of the original homestead to developers, land that had been in our family for generations, to keep the rest afloat. I forged my father's signature on the paperwork before he died, dated it years earlier. Nobody knew. Not Martha, certainly not Kyle. I told myself it was a necessary sacrifice. The shame of it ate at me anyway. This past spring marked my 67th birthday and the farm's centennial year, a big deal for any American farming family. Kyle had been pushing me to get the paperwork in order for months, talking about succession planning and tax implications. I kept putting him off, changing the subject to the early planting we needed to do or the new irrigation system we were considering. Martha and her husband Robert flew in from Des Moines. Kyle's daughter Emma came home from her sophomore year at Iowa State. Even some of the Johnsons from Sarah's side made the trip. Kyle had arranged everything, a big tent in the yard, catering from that new farm-to-table restaurant in town, old photos displayed on boards showing the evolution of Anderson land through the decades. "It's not just for your birthday, Dad," Kyle had explained. "It's about celebrating what we've built and looking toward the future." I should have known then what was coming. The morning of the party, I found Kyle in the office, papers spread across the desk. Farm blueprints, bank statements, yield reports from the last decade. He didn't hear me come in. "Planning on buying more land?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Kyle startled, gathering the papers quickly. "Just getting some things together for the attorney." "Attorney? What attorney?" "Look, Dad, I wanted to surprise you, but I've been talking to Jim Harkins about setting up a proper family LLC, transfer the farm gradually, minimize the estate taxes when—" He trailed off. "When I die?" I finished for him. "It's just smart planning. Emma's future, my future, your retirement." Retirement. The word hit like a hailstorm on new seedlings. Retirement wasn't something Anderson men did. We worked until we couldn't, then supervised from the porch until we died. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, more sharply than intended. "This is still my farm." Something flickered across Kyle's face. Disappointment, frustration. "Dad, I've put 20 years into this place. I've doubled our yield, opened 3 new revenue streams." You've earned a paycheck every month, haven't you?" The words came out before I could stop them, my father's voice emerging from my mouth. "Right." Kyle's jaw tightened. "Just the hired hand. Got it." The party began at noon. Neighbors and friends arrived bearing casseroles and pies, like this was a church potluck instead of a catered affair. Kyle played the perfect host, introducing Martha's city friends to old farming families, making sure everyone had drinks, accepting congratulations on the farm's success. I found myself drifting toward the edge of things, watching my son work the crowd. He had Sarah's ease with people. When had he become so confident, so capable? And why did that make me feel so threatened? Midway through the afternoon, Bill Johnson, Sarah's brother, cornered me by the barn. "Frank, you seen what they're doing over on the old north section? Framing going up already." My stomach dropped. The north section, where those 50 acres had been. "Developers move fast," I mumbled. "Damn shame," Bill continued, oblivious to my discomfort. Prime farmland turning into another subdivision. Your daddy would have fought that tooth and nail. Before I could respond, Kyle appeared with Emma in tow. "Uncle Bill, they're about to do the toast. Dad, we need you front and center." As I walked toward the tent, I noticed a stranger in a suit talking to Martha, a man with a leather portfolio and city shoes unsuited for farm grass. Jim Harkins, I presumed, the attorney. Already here, already working on transferring my life's work from my hands. The tent fell quiet as Kyle tapped his glass. "I want to thank everyone for coming today to celebrate not just my father's birthday, but a century of Anderson farming." Applause rippled through the crowd. As many of you know, this land has seen good times and bad, drought and plenty. But through it all, the Andersons persevered because we understood something fundamental. The land doesn't belong to us. We belong to the land. More applause. Kyle was good at this, too good. I felt sweat beading on my forehead despite the mild spring day. Today, I'm honored to announce the next chapter in our family's story. Kyle's eyes found mine, and I saw in them a certainty that chilled me. "Dad, could you join me up here?" I moved woodenly to his side as he continued. "Last month, I finalized the paperwork to establish Anderson Family Farms, LLC, with Dad transitioning to Chairman Emeritus and me stepping up as Managing Partner." Kyle pulled out an envelope. "Inside is the formal transfer of the main farm operations to me, with a generous pension provision for Dad and college trust funds established for Emma and any future grandchildren." The crowd erupted in cheers. I stood frozen, mind racing. Paperwork finalized? How? The farm was in my name, only my name. Unless... The realization hit me like a combine at full speed. The bank refinancing I'd signed last winter. The stack of documents Kyle had explained were just updating our equipment loans. I'd trusted him, signed without reading everything. Had I signed away my farm? Kyle was hugging me now, the crowd watching expectantly. "Happy birthday, Dad," he whispered. "You can finally relax." Over his shoulder, I spotted Jim Harkins nodding approvingly. Martha looked pleased but slightly uncomfortable. And at the back of the tent, partially hidden behind the cake table, stood Tom Gunderson from the county records office, watching with an odd expression. The man who'd helped me falsify those documents about the sold acreage years ago. The pieces clicked together with terrible clarity. Kyle knew. Somehow, he knew everything. "I'd like to say a few words," I announced, my voice steadier than I felt. The crowd, still buzzing with excitement over Kyle's announcement, gradually quieted. I could see the slight tension in Kyle's shoulders as he stepped aside, that confident smile never wavering. "Farming isn't just a business," I began. "That's something my father taught me. It's not about spreadsheets or LLCs or tax strategies. It's about heritage, continuity." I paused, scanning the faces watching me. Neighbors who'd known me my whole life. Sarah's family, my own blood. Kyle has always been forward-thinking. When he was just 10 years old, he set up a roadside stand to sell our sweet corn directly to passing cars instead of to the co-op. Made an extra 30 cents a dozen. Appreciative chuckles rippled through the crowd. That innovative thinking has served this farm well, I won't deny that. Kyle's smile had begun to fade, uncertainty creeping into his expression. But there are some traditions, some values that shouldn't change. Honesty, respect, consultation. I emphasized each word, feeling the temperature of the gathering shift. The Anderson farm has survived for a century because each generation earned their place. Nothing was taken. Martha stepped forward slightly, concern evident on her face. "Frank, perhaps this isn't—" "It's exactly the time, Martha," I cut her off. "When better to discuss the future of the Anderson legacy than during its centennial? I turned back to Kyle, who had gone completely still, eyes locked on mine. You talk about the land like you know it, like you've suffered for it. Have you ever mortgaged your future for this soil? Have you ever had to choose between paying the property taxes or buying medicine? An uncomfortable silence descended. Emma looked between her father and me, confusion plain on her face. This wasn't the celebration speech anyone had expected. "Dad," Kyle said quietly, warning in his voice, "let's discuss this privately." "Why?"
You made your announcements publicly. Let's have truth publicly too. I pulled a folded paper from my pocket, the property record I'd retrieved from my safe that morning after seeing all those documents on Kyle's desk. You want to talk about transitions and paperwork? Let's discuss the paperwork my father used to secretly take control of this farm from me. Or better yet, I locked eyes with Tom Gunderson, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the cake behind him. Let's talk about the 50 acres on the north section, the land that's now growing houses instead of corn. A collective gasp moved through the crowd. Bill Johnson's head snapped up in recognition. Needed to sell it to save the rest. 15 years ago, when prices bottomed out and the bank was breathing down my neck. I was revealing too much, but couldn't stop now. I kept it quiet, forged some paperwork with Tom's help, kept this farm alive while letting a piece of it die. Kyle's face had drained of color. You sold Anderson land without telling anyone? That land was meant to be part of the trust. Trust? I laughed, a harsh sound even to my own ears. What trust? My father dissolved the trust. I've been carrying this place on my back alone. And now you think you can just take it with some papers I didn't even know I was signing? The lawyer, Harkins, stepped forward. "Mr. Anderson, I assure you, everything was completely legal." "Legal doesn't make it right," I was shouting now. "I built this. Me, not him. He comes in with his college degree and his organic sections and thinks he knows better than 50 years of experience." I was losing control, my carefully constructed revelation spiraling into raw emotion. I could see Martha moving toward me, concern etched on her face. Robert was shepherding some of the guests toward me edge of the tent. Emma had tears streaming down her cheeks. But it was Kyle's expression that finally cut through my rage. Not anger, not even hurt, just profound disappointment. "I knew about the 50 acres, Dad," he said quietly. "I've known for years. Found the original paperwork in the attic when I was looking for Mom's photos." The admission knocked the wind from me. "You knew and said nothing?" What was I supposed to say? That I caught my father, the man who preached honesty above all, in a lie? That the land that was supposed to be our family's forever was being carved up for McMansions? Kyle's voice remained steady, but I could hear the years of suppressed hurt. "I figured you had your reasons, that you'd tell me when you were ready." "Then why this?" I gestured at the papers, the lawyer, the whole orchestrated event. "Why go behind my back?" Kyle's eyes hardened. "Because you were never going to be ready, were you? Every time I brought up succession planning, you changed the subject. Every improvement I suggested was a battle. I've spent 20 years trying to earn your trust, your approval, and it's never been enough." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small burlap bag. "I was going to give you this later, in private. They're the original Anderson corn strain. I found some seeds in Grandpa's old storage shed and had them tested. Still viable. I thought you might enjoy growing a small plot of them, connecting to our roots." He held the bag out to me, and suddenly the gesture took on its full meaning. Not an insult, not a dismissal, an acknowledgement of history while we moved forward. But I was too far gone in my outburst. "Seeds?" I snapped, not taking the bag. "I lose my farm and get seeds in return?" Kyle's face hardened. You haven't lost anything. You're still the legal owner. The LLC just provides structure, protects us from estate taxes, creates continuity.
If you'd bothered to actually read what you signed. I trusted you! The words exploded from me. That was my mistake, wasn't it? The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing in the trees around the farmyard. Yes, Kyle finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Trusting me to help carry this family forward was clearly your biggest mistake. He set the seed bag on the table between us, turned, and walked out of the tent. Emma, after one tearful look at me, followed her father. The party disintegrated rapidly after that, guests making awkward excuses and quick exits. I stood alone in the center of the tent, the untouched birthday cake and Kyle's bag of heirloom seeds sitting like accusations before me. The next 3 days passed in a fog of silence. Kyle moved into the old foreman's cottage at the edge of the property. Emma went back to college early. Martha delayed her return to Des Moines, camping out in her old bedroom and trying to mediate a peace that neither Kyle nor I seemed prepared to accept. "You've both made mistakes," she told me over coffee on the 4th morning, "but this isn't irreparable, Frank." "He tried to take the farm," I insisted, though with less conviction than before. Martha sighed. "I've read the LLC paperwork, all of it. You're still the majority owner until you choose to transfer more shares. Kyle just created a structure that would make transition smoother and protect the farm from being carved up by taxes when you—" She trailed off. "When I die," I finished for her. Death had never frightened me. Irrelevance did. "He was trying to protect your legacy, not steal it." Martha reached across the table. "And maybe he went about it wrong. But Frank, you haven't exactly been transparent either." That afternoon, I drove into town to see Tom Gunderson. He looked nervous when I walked into the county records office.
"Frank, about the party." I waved him off. "I need to know something straight. Did Kyle come to you about the north section?" Tom hesitated. "Not directly. About 3 years ago, he requested copies of all Anderson property transactions, standard procedure for estate planning. So he saw the sale documents. And the date discrepancies. He's not stupid, Frank." Tom lowered his voice. "He asked me about it privately. I told him the truth. And he thanked me for helping his dad save the farm." Tom shrugged. "No anger, no accusations. He just wanted to understand." I drove home slowly, taking the long route past the north section. The development was nearly complete now, 15 homes where corn once grew. Not McMansions as Kyle had said, but modest family homes. Young couples planting gardens, children's bicycles and driveways. Different kind of growth, different kind of legacy. When I returned to the farm, I found the attorney's card that Martha had left on the counter. Jim Harkins answered on the second ring. "Mr. Anderson, I was hoping you'd call. I want to understand exactly what I signed." Harkins walked me through it patiently. The LLC structure, the phased transition plan, the provisions Kyle had insisted on, that I retain veto power over any major changes, that I receive a guaranteed income regardless of farm performance, that a portion of profits go to a scholarship fund in Sarah's name at the local high school. "And one more thing you should know," Harkins added. "Kyle took out a personal loan to buy back 5 acres of the north section development, the corner parcel adjacent to the main farm. He's been working with the county to get it rezoned back to agricultural use." After I hung up, I sat on the porch watching the sunset over fields that had defined my entire existence. The same sunset my grandfather had watched. The same my son would watch long after I was gone, if I didn't drive him away first. Around dusk, Martha brought out the bag of heirloom seeds Kyle had tried to give me. "He left these with me," she said simply, "in case you wanted them." I took the small burlap sack, feeling its surprising weight. Opening it, I found not just seeds, but a folded note. Kyle's handwriting, methodical and precise.
"Dad, these are from Grandpa's storage. The original Anderson strain, developed by your great-grandfather during the Dust Bowl. Drought-resistant, survived when everything else failed. Thought you might want to plant a small plot, maybe near Mom's garden. The past and future growing together." The lump in my throat made it hard to speak. Martha sat beside me in companionable silence as darkness settled over the farm. "I need to make this right," I finally said. "Yes, you do." No coddling from Martha. Never had been. The next morning, I drove to the foreman's cottage before sunrise. Kyle was already up, coffee in hand, reviewing planting schedules on his tablet. Some things never change, Anderson men rising with the sun. Some things evolve, technology replacing the paper ledgers I'd used all my life. "Got a minute?" I asked from the doorway. He looked up, guarded. "Sure." I set the bag of seeds on the table between us. "I'd like to plant these, but I need help identifying the best spot." A peace offering. Not quite an apology, but he recognized it from what it was. That day, we worked together preparing a small plot near Sarah's old flower garden. Neither of us mentioned the LLC, the party, or the North section. Instead, Kyle told me what he'd learned about the heirloom variety, how it had been developed specifically for our soil type, how his research suggested it might actually yield better than some modern hybrids in drought conditions. As we worked, Emma arrived unexpectedly. "Thought you might need an extra pair of hands," she said, looking between us cautiously. "Always," I told her, and saw Kyle's surprise at the easy acceptance. When had I become so resistant to help? That evening, Martha made dinner, her last night before returning to Des Moines. As we ate, Kyle casually mentioned the 5 acres he'd bought back from the development. "What are you planning to do with it?" I asked. "I was thinking a trial orchard. Apples, maybe some cherries, diversification." He hesitated. "Unless you have other ideas?" The question hung in the air, an olive branch, an acknowledgement that my opinion still mattered. "Your mother always wanted fruit trees," I said finally. "Sarah's orchard has a nice ring to it." Kyle's smile was worth every acre I'd ever worked. 2 months later, the heirloom corn stood tall, taller than the modern varieties in the main fields, its tassels golden in the summer sun. Kyle and I had worked out a revised LLC agreement, one that formalized his growing management role while acknowledging my continued ownership. The papers sat signed in the office, no longer a secret or a threat, but simply a practical solution. The real healing, though, came through the work. Side by side in the orchard plot, planning irrigation, comparing notes on the heirloom corn's progress, teaching Emma to drive the new GPS-guided tractor when she came home for summer break. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching a thunderstorm roll across our western fields, Kyle asked the question I'd been dreading. "Why didn't you tell me? About selling the acres? About Grandpa's manipulation? Any of it?" I considered deflecting, but owed him more than that. "Pride," I admitted. "Shame. Fear you'd think less of me." I looked at him directly. "The same reasons you didn't tell me you knew." He nodded slowly. "Guess we're more alike than different." "God help us both," I replied, and we laughed. A genuine laugh, the first in too long. The unexpected twist came in late August when Bill Johnson stopped by with an old metal box he'd found clearing out his father's attic. "Belonged to your father-in-law," he explained. "Thought you'd want it." Inside were letters, dozens of them, from my father to Sarah's father, dating back to the 1970s. In them, a different Richard Anderson emerged, uncertain, seeking advice, admitting mistakes. In the last letter, written just months before his death, my father had written, "Frank's a better farmer than I ever was, more patient, more forward-thinking. I've made a mess of things with the loans, but I trust he'll find a way through. That boy always does." I passed the letter wordlessly to Kyle, who read it twice. "He was proud of you," Kyle said quietly. "He never told me." "Some things are hard to say out loud," Kyle met my eyes, "but that doesn't make them less true." That night I took out the farm ledgers, the old paper ones and Kyle's digital versions, and began planning for the next season. Our season, together. Looking back now, I realize that what almost broke our family has actually made us stronger. 3 generations of Anderson men struggling with the same demons: pride, fear of inadequacy, and that stubborn inability to speak the truths buried in our hearts. Kyle and I still disagree sometimes. He wants solar panels on the South 40. I think it's our best soil for rotation crops. But we talk now, really talk, and sometimes I even listen. The heirloom corn has become our signature crop, with Emma leading a small batch bourbon project using the heritage strain as part of her agricultural business degree. Anderson Original sells for a premium at farmers markets across 3 counties. The irony isn't lost on me that those seeds, the ones I initially saw as an insult, have become the bridge between our past and future. Sometimes the smallest gifts carry the most meaning. I still own the farm, but I'm gradually transferring shares to Kyle, on my terms and his together. And yes, I've finally started taking Sundays off. Retirement? Not exactly. But I'm learning there's more to life than working land that will outlast us all anyway. If there's anything this journey has taught me, it's that our legacies aren't built in the soil we till, but in the truths we tell. The farm isn't just 3,000 acres of Iowa's finest. It's the stories we've planted here, the struggles we've weathered, and the growth that comes after every storm. So that's my story. Not the one I expected to live, but perhaps the one I needed. If you've stayed with me this long, I'd appreciate you hitting that subscribe button to hear more real-life stories like mine. And if you know someone struggling with family land or legacy issues, maybe sharing this video might help them see a way forward. Because in the end, the most precious inheritance isn't measured in acres or dollars. It's measured in the courage to break cycles, speak truths, and plant new beginnings, even at 67 years old.